Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 2 discussion. Last week I was hoping that we were going to daily teasers for Path of Exile 2. That didn't eventuate, but maybe it is starting to eventuate now. What I wanted to do in this, I'm calling day 3 of teaser season, is go through some of the small teasers that were released last week that weren't worth their own video, and then also go through the thing that was released today, which would have been worth its own video because it's one of the first unique items from Path of Exile 2 that we've got, as well as a whole bunch of information associated with it. So let's start out with a preview for a new skill that was introduced. This is Cluster Grenade. This is something Granny Gear Games released last week, and it's a pretty straightforward skill. You target an area on the ground, your crossbow fires, and it sets off a whole bunch of damaging fireworks there. Path of Exile 1 players might think that it's closer to Seismic Trap than anything else, although instead of being a spell and a trap, it is something that you fire out of a crossbow. So here I'm going to demonstrate what the skill looks like in practice, but pay attention to the fact that there is a significant delay between the player initiating the skill and it appearing to deal damage. Again, this is why I compare it to Seismic Trap. Fired off, and then it drops a couple of times, and then there we go with a massive, massive explosion. The second time we fire it, it's going to be in conjunction with multiple projectile support, and you're going to see that 3 projectiles are going to be sent off, and there we go, boom, boom, boom. Another one, boom, boom, boom. Another one, boom, boom, boom. And that's basically what Cluster Grenade looks like. Now, something that's interesting here is that the Mercenary's thematics are very much tied more to modern weaponry than you might expect. Although they're using a crossbow here, the crossbow's damage projection, its rate of fire and the like, don't feel like a historically accurate crossbow, and that's something Granny Gear Games have gone for here. Instead, some of the skills will look more like a machine gun, and others will look more like grenade launchers, as you see here. That seems to be a very deliberate design decision by Granny Gear Games. Additionally, Granny Gear Games don't hide the fact that this is slow to detonate, and they asked the little question, I wonder if we can make these detonate faster. Undoubtedly, this is something players can invest into if they want to go down the grenade route. Next, we have a series of journal entries written by someone in-world, talking about various monsters that they've found in their expeditions into Exile. So, here we have in the Agarat ruins of Exile, a description of the Filthy Crone with some background lore information. Nothing here that's really significant when it comes to the details of how you would fight against this monster, just basically pointing out that this is not a very nice character. Then we have the Hunchback Clubbers with very little in-game relevant information. These seem to be swarming and very weak enemies, but of course we'll find out whether that's going to always be the case, or whether you can get individual rare ones that are nastier. And then we have the Dredge Fiend, which is another monster that you'll see here, carrying an item in its right hand that looks in line with a Convoking Wand from Path of Exile 1. Finally, we have the third teaser, and this is the one that was released today, the one that I think might have the most information in it. This is the Merit of Service. This is a unique item, and one of very few unique items that we've got stats of from Path of Exile 2. I think it's important to comment at this point that we lack the context to evaluate the power level of this item. There's things that we can use as hints here. The fact that it's minimum level 8 probably means it's not a super endgame item, and additionally the fact that it has only a small number of stats and those numbers aren't particularly high also probably means that it's not a super endgame item. I would expect this to fill a similar role in Path of Exile 2 to the role that Crest of Parandus plays in Path of Exile 1. Something you're very happy to use early if you happen to get it, but that's not going to be something that you're going to necessarily want to equip on an endgame character. However, we will have to find out how accurate that is. It is definitely the case that if you show a rookie Path of Exile player, and I'm not just talking people who have never booted up the game, talking people who aren't aware about enkindling orbs, so people who haven't really got past about level 60 in the campaign, if you were to show them Mage Blood, they're likely not to realise that this is considered by many people one of the very best items in Path of Exile 1. Likewise, you could show someone Original Sin, and I'll bet there'll be a number of newer players to Path of Exile 1 that wouldn't recognise that that is a powerhouse endgame item. So we could be wrong, but based on the available context, I'm going to say this is an early leveling unique and assess it accordingly. One of the things that's significant here is not so much what the stats are, but what they can tell us about the game more generally. Probably the most interesting thing here is that it grants the skill Raise Shield. The way that shields are going to work in Path of Exile 2 is that they're going to provide some sort of just baseline statistics, but then while you actively block with them, while you actively use this skill Raise Shield, they'll provide you with additional defenses over and above the base stats that they've got on them. Now, Merit of Service has a 36% chance to block, at least for this particular copy. Who knows whether there's a Divine Orb roll range on that. Now, this item reads, allies in presence have block chance equal to yours. In your presence is terminology in Path of Exile 1 that means within 8 meters of you. It's something that Grinding Gear Games started using about patch 3.17 in order to try and standardize some of the various aspects of nearby and not quite nearby, but a bit further than nearby that it existed in the game before that. In your presence just means within 8 meters of you. Allies can mean minions in a couple of different senses. Either it can be a traditional minion, such as a summoned skeleton that is fighting alongside you because you've compelled it to, or it can mean another player that you've convinced, cajoled, or coerced into playing alongside you. And those allies are going to have their block chance equal to yours. The way I personally read this is that while you are actively blocking, this is going to give you 36% chance to block, and that's going to apply to your allies whether they're actively blocking by using a Razor Shield or not. I could be wrong in this interpretation though. We'll find out a lot more about this when we get to actually test a few things in-game. Finally, we have the lines plus 75 to stun threshold. You'll notice there that you can mouse over these. However, here you cannot mouse over it in the actual image that we've got here. So this appears to be something you could mouse over in-game if you want more information on what exactly stun threshold does. This is something that's really important. Path of Exile has needed this for a long time. Unfortunately, there is no mouse over for in your presence, or in presence as it's called here, which is unfortunate because that would be very useful to have. A couple of other things you'll notice with Merit of Service, it has some pretty detailed artwork compared to a lot of unique items in Path of Exile 1. This is what it'll look like equipped to your character in 3D, and this is what it'll look like when it's sitting in your inventory. Additionally, there's these decorations on the box up the top that are different to things that exist in Path of Exile 1. Fun fact, in Path of Exile 1, this decoration actually looks different in the base version of the game and in the Ruthless version of the game. I don't think it looks different in Hardcore or in Solo Self-Found, but it does look different in Ruthless. I'm not sure why that's the case. It's just a design decision that someone probably made when they were implementing Ruthless. Additionally, in Path of Exile 1, sometimes these decorators are replaced by ones that symbolize influence types. For example, if you pick up a unique item that has Shaper and Elder influence, which a couple of the Uber Elder drops do have, then it will have a Shaper icon on one side and an Elder icon on the other, replacing the normal unique decorations. I wonder if we'll see anything along those lines in Path of Exile 2. That stuff we're not likely to find out until players start getting into endgame proper. Another thing I wanted to mention that hasn't fit into the rest of this video is that Grinding Gear Games have announced the way that Leech is going to work in Path of Exile 2. They've come up with a really elegant system because in Path of Exile 1 it is hyper complicated. In Path of Exile 2 there's going to be instant Leech is going to be the default, but the amount that you do is going to scale upwards based upon the amount of damage that you do, but at the same time it's going to scale downwards with the monsters having a stat called Leech Resistance. The idea that they're going for here is if you're running content that is still challenging for your character, Leech is going to allow you to recover some life when you hit the monster, but it's not going to be an overwhelming amount. But if you decide I want to just go back and farm something 3 or 4 levels below where I'm comfortably sitting at, suddenly Leech Resistance on monsters is going to be lower, and as a result, you're going to find your Leech is going to be much more effective than it is when you're running progression content. I think that's going to be a really interesting dynamic, and it's going to address some of the issues that came up in Path of Exile 1 when players had access to unrestrained instant Leech early in the game's history. What happened there was that monsters couldn't kill you unless they could kill you in one frame because players started leeching back so much life. So what did Grinding Gear Games do if they wanted a monster to feel tough? Well, they had to give it abilities that could one-shot you, otherwise those abilities wouldn't matter. Because a monster attack that drops you from 100% life to 10% life poses no danger unless it critically hits, if you're going to be back to full life on the next frame. Anyways, that's the information that we've got for today. I'm hoping that I'm in a position now to start putting out these videos daily again. It's going to depend upon the cadence of releases from Grinding Gear Games. We'll find that out over the next time. May your Varlobs have interesting results.